Hey there everybody, Seja here, and I'm just hanging out in my little library here in the classroom where I teach all of our workshops and shoot a bunch of our videos here, and just been doing some research for my Materia Medica monthly program, where I'm going in depth on individual herbs each month. Each video for that program has been averaging 2 to 3 hours just on one herb. So I think I've been getting into a lot of detail, and it's been really great for me too to have that consistency in my studies and research and focusing just on one plant at a time and really going deep into that one remedy for that month, which is a really good way to learn your herbs, right? To just focus maybe on one plant at a time and really go deep into that herb, study it inside and out through your experience, through your research, through other people's experiences, tasting that herb, and every way that you can immerse yourself in that plant. Just for 4 weeks, that one herb, man, you're gonna really know that herb very, very well. And I think that's one of the best ways to learn about an herb. But whenever I'm doing my research and putting these monographs together, I'm really compiling from like every possible resource that I can, from scientific information, clinical information, Ayurvedic perspectives, Chinese perspectives, eclectics, physiomedicalists, naturopath, science, chemistry, everything about that plant. I want to learn about it because it's all a different piece of the puzzle. But one of the things that I've noticed in a lot of herbal books, and this is just my own personal opinion on things, is that a lot of the times for me, the little monographs in a lot of books on herbal medicine, I don't really feel like I get that much out of them. And it's like I feel like a jerk saying it. But for me, one of the things that I've noticed almost universal amongst herbal monographs is that, and don't get me wrong, most of them have really great information. I'm just saying that for myself personally, I don't come out of them feeling like I know the herb itself that much better, or how to apply it therapeutically. And I think comes down to one herb, or one word, and this is uses, the word uses. And what we end up seeing on a lot of herbal text is, the Latin name and the common name, and maybe there will be a section that says actions and it'll give you a list of actions, and maybe there's a chemistry section and it'll give you all the chemical compounds in it. And the really good herbals will have an energetic section, and it'll say, if it's heating or cooling or moistening or drying or stimulating or relaxing or tonifying, or how it's affecting yin or yang, or how it's affecting the doshas of Ayurveda, or how it's affecting the tissue states, right? Kind of that energetic data, very, very important. Even less will you have information in regards to the taste of the herbs, but then the main section that you'll see is uses, right? And the uses section usually will sound something like this. It'll say, this herb is good for, and then it'll give a big list of symptoms. This herb is good for flatulence and dyspepsia and bloating and nervousness and tension and headaches and heart conditions and blah, 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 blah. And it'll be kind of this whole list of symptoms or conditions that herb is good for. And I'm not saying that herb may not be good for those symptoms, but it's really hard to understand how that herb works based on that kind of information. And of course, you can look at the actions and you can really start to tease it out for yourself, but a lot of the times they're not really doing that for you in those books. And so for me, what a big turning point was for me is I was noticing, I was like, man, all these sections in these books always say uses, and they always say the phrase good for, right? And it really kind of bugs me sometimes, the phrase good for, it's like you don't meet a person and say, hey, introduce yourself. Hi, my name's Seja. And they're like, hey, I'm Bill. It's like, hey, Bill, nice to meet you. So what are you good for? Right? We would never do that. And we never say that to a person, but we say it about plants all the time. Right? And people say, oh yeah, that's whorehound over there. Oh, whorehound, cool. What's it good for? And for me, I don't want to know what a plant's good for. I want to know who it is. I want to know who it is as a being. I want to know who it is as a medicine, right? I want to know its spirit. I want to know its body. I want to know everything there is about it. I also want to know how it's used, right? It's good to know what it's good for, but if we focus on what an herb is good for, we're going to miss a whole other spectrum of what that plant is, who that plant is, and how it functions. So I came up with this phrase, clinical patterns. Well, I probably didn't come up with this phrase. I'm sure someone else is using that terminology, but it's just the phrase that I like to think of when I'm considering the medicinal properties and uses of a plant. Clinical patterns. Think of the difference between the phrase clinical patterns versus uses, right? When we're looking at a pattern, the key word there is pattern. Clinical meaning how are we going to utilize this plant as a medicine? Pattern meaning what's the big picture? What's the interconnectivity between who that plant is and what it's doing to the human organism? So rather than saying willow bark is good for headaches, okay, willow bark is good for headaches. Well, what kind of headache? In what kind of person? What type of situation? What types of headaches is it not good for? Because there's a lot of people out there that have used willow bark for headaches and it didn't do anything. Why is that? There's a lot of people out there that have taken willow bark for their headache and it has done a lot. And here comes my dog to say hi. And so when we think of, well, what's the difference there? What's the difference between willow bark working for a headache and willow bark not working for a headache, right? The difference there is the pattern. A very different pattern in the person versus the core pattern in the plant. Then in some people, the pattern of willow matched that person and it worked very, very well. In another person, the pattern in willow didn't match their pattern and it didn't work very, very well. So, okay, the pattern in the person, what does that mean? So if we're looking at a person, say a headache, well, you've got different types of headaches. And this is where understanding the energetics of the plants and understanding constitutional theory, understanding tissue state models is very, very important, because this is where you start to get specific into whether an herb is going to be suitable for a person or not. So you've got the type of headache that's very cold, very deficient, heavy, maybe they have kind of brain fog, it's aggravated when it gets cold outside, or they eat really cold foods. It's kind of an overall dense, general kind of throbbing pain, right? This would be in contradiction to like a very hot kind of headache, right? Where they've got a red flushed face, all the veins are bulging in their head, it's sharp, and it's painful. Obviously it's a headache, it's painful, but it's like more this throbbing headache, a sharp pain, aggravated by heat. They might be irritated about it, whereas a person with the other type of headache might get kind of melancholic or depressed or sad about it. Very different kind of headache, right? Now the willow bark is a cold plant, right? It's very cold, it's very bitter, and it's astringent, right? Now if you give that cold plant to someone with a cold headache, it's probably not going to help them out very much. But if you give that cold plant to a person with a hot headache, it's probably going to be more suitable for them. So that's what I mean when I'm saying the pattern in the plant, really looking at the constellation of the energetics, the taste, and the actions, and the affinities of that plant, and then matching that pattern in the plant to the pattern in the person, which is their whole constellation of symptoms, along with the energetics and tissue states and constitution that's the context within which that symptom has arisen. So when we're thinking about clinical patterns of a plant, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, this herb is used for or good for this particular kind of symptom. Well, what are the specifics of that? Like, why is that herb good for that symptom? So for me, I'm going to say, okay, fennel is useful for gas, bloating, and flatulence. Well, why is that? Oh, well, fennel, it has these aromatic essential oils that are very volatile, pungent, and warming. They have a carminative action in the digestive system that's going to increase blood flow to the digestive organs. It's going to relax tension and spasm and cramping, and it's going to ultimately, through that aromatic property, it's going to dispel the wind element. So it's going to be very specific for what the physiomedicalists would refer to as the wind tension tissue state and the cold depression tissue state. It's going to warm up the system, and it's going to dispel wind, gas, bloating, and relax tension. From an Ayurvedic perspective, it means it's going to calm vata. It's going to be very good for vata type conditions. So that's what I mean when, so that's like, now it's like you understand fennel on a much deeper level when you think it through like that, right? So notice what I did there when I was describing fennel. I talked about the taste of it. It's aromatic, right? It has the essential oils in it. So it has that pungent aromatic taste. I talked about the energetics of it being a warming remedy. I talked about its actions of it being a carminative, a relaxant antispasmodic, a circulatory stimulant for the gut, the actions, and I talked about the affinities, the stomach, the intestines, the circulation, etc. So when you start to connect those dots, taste, action, affinity, energetics, and then you couple that, you bring all of that together, and then bring that into the uses and properties, that's what I call a clinical pattern. And the way I personally approach an herbal medicine is looking at, okay, say, say we have an herb. I just recently did our most recent issue, Materia Medica Monthly. I did it on lemon balm. So lemon balm's been on my mind lately. So if we think of lemon balm, right, you'll see in a lot of texts, lemon balm is good for nervousness and anxiety and heart palpitations and insomnia and nervous digestion and gas and bloating and things like that. It's all good, all very true about lemon balm. But if we look at like what's behind all of that, what's behind all of those uses of that? Oh, if we just realize that lemon balm is a nervous system relaxant, that it's a nervine sedative that switches the nervous system from sympathetic to parasympathetic, and that it has a specific affinity for the brain, the heart, and the gut, all of that makes sense. Right? All of that comes together in understanding this one pattern in lemon balm. So it's like, yeah, it's a nervine sedative, relaxant, carminative, right? Therefore, it's going to help with the gas and the bloating and the gut digestive upset. It's going to settle the nervous system in the brain, right? Hence the anxiety or the nervousness, the stress, the insomnia. It's going to help with a heart palpitation or nervous tension around the heart. And it's going to help with kind of a nervous digestive system or the nervous system in the solar plexus. So I hope this is making sense, this dynamic between uses and clinical patterns. So when you're researching an herb, I encourage you to kind of hold in the front of your mind as you're learning about a plant, you're learning about its properties, that you ask yourself, what's the pattern here, right? What's the pattern in this plant and how it's influencing the physiology and the energetics that is then making it beneficial for a particular type of symptom. So rather than memorizing, this herb is good for that herb is good for this, you want to say, oh, this herb does this to the organs and the systems and the tissues of the body, therefore it treats these types of conditions. Man, when you know your plants like that, you know them on a whole other level, and you can explain it, right? And to me, being able to explain how a plant functions helps me to better educate my clients and the people that I work with, so that they understand a little bit more about what's going on in their bodies. But it also just helps in my own personal understanding of that plant, to where the information integrates on a much deeper level, and I won't be like, oh, that plant, wait, what does that plant do again? Right? It's like, well, when we study it from this pattern-based model, it's like we know it by heart, right? And that's one of the things that one of my first spiritual teachers, Osho, always talked about. He said, you know, the mind divides, the mind analyzes, the mind reduces things down to all a bunch of little parts. And ultimately, it's the mind that has to memorize things, right? But it splits, the mind divides. Whereas the heart gives unity, right? The heart connects things together. It bridges, it sees patterns of relationship rather than differences. And so that's why I always say, I always encourage my students, hey, don't just memorize the properties of a medicinal plant, because then you're just knowing it up here in the mind. I want you to really experience that herb. I want you to look for the pattern in the plant and how the pattern in the plant matches a certain pattern in a person. And when you see that pattern, that's when you know it by heart. And there's a big difference there between, the way I think of it is like knowledge of plants versus wisdom of plants. To me, knowledge, it's like anyone can have knowledge of plants and just memorize a bunch of data. But to have a wisdom, to me, that means you really, not just that you know about the plants, but that you know the plants, right? That you're not concerned just about what they're good for, but you're more concerned about who they are. And to me, that's what being an herbalist is all about, is that we're mediators between the plant kingdom and the human kingdom, and that we have to understand both languages. And the way nature functions, it's a pattern-based language. It's not necessarily a scientific, reductionistic, linear kind of language. It's more of a symbolic language. It's a non-linear language. It's a fractal language. It's pattern-based. And so when we study our medicinal properties of plants through this lens of patterns instead of properties or uses, I think that will just ultimately make you a better herbalist. So anyways, I just wanted to shoot this quick video and share this with you. It was just a thought that I had, the thinking about. I thought it would serve you well to kind of orient your mind when you're studying your herbs. And I gotta tell you, you know, for me, what I just shared with you was like this huge turning point in my research on herbal medicines. It completely transformed how I understand plants, how I approach learning about plants, and ultimately it's made me a much better and effective and efficient herbalist as well. So I'd love to hear your comments, your questions about this concept of uses of plants versus clinical patterns. If you have any thoughts, you have any questions, feel free to post underneath below. If you're watching this anywhere but my blog, head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com. We've got tons of free videos, tons of more free mini courses over there, and just lots of goodness over there at evolutionaryherbalism.com. So check that out. And I hope that you learned something good from this video today. So we'll see you next time. Until then, take care and be well.